Welcome, everyone. We've got a few more participants still coming in, but I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for sharing part of your day with all of us tonight. I'm Trish Tolbert, Development Strategist for the National Embed Team for Best Friends. And that means I spend a lot of time working with agencies, organizations, 501c3s, as well as municipal agencies, working with our fundraising mentors and mentees and creating resources like the one that we're talking about tonight. We've got a few housekeeping items we want to get through first. So give us just a moment to do that. Everyone is automatically muted, so you don't have to worry about unmuting yourself along the way. If you have a question at any point, please type those in the Q&A box. We will try to get to as many of them as we can, and we will leave some time at the very end of our discussion tonight to address some of those questions. We may pause a few times to take some as the topics are relevant. And then we'd like for you to keep an eye on that box for additional resources. We'll be putting some resource links in there as we go, and then we'll also be able to add some things at the end. And so what I'd like to do now is to introduce you to our panelists, three people that I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to know, who are fun and who have some really different and interesting perspectives on fundraising. I'd like to introduce you first to Sarah Cano, who is the Community Engagement Manager for the Humane Society of Harlingen. And Sarah is one of those people, I'm sure we have some folks among the participants who are like, Sarah, she does it all. She is the sole person dedicated to communications and fundraising at her organization. And I'll let her unpack a little more of just how big her team really is when we get to her intro part. The next person on our panel is Michelle Dosson. If you've been with us on previous town halls, you may know Dosson. She is now the Bureau Manager in Norfolk, working for that municipality. She has several previous lives you can read about in her bio, but she also has a great animal control, care and control background, and was just recently elected to the board of NACA, which stands for National Animal Care and Control Association. So we'll let her talk a little more about that later. And finally, we have Nick Walton, who is our manager for the National Municipal and Shelter Support Team at Best Friends. Nick also has a very thorough background in animal control, animal care, being out in the community. He's got a really fascinating perspective on the whole role of animal care and control officers. And you may be wondering, why are these people on a fundraising panel? Well, you're going to find out as we talk about the resource, because as you'll hear us say more than once, there is a role in fundraising for everyone. Scary, huh? So let's get this rolling with a bit of a poll, and I'm going to ask our producers to put that up, having to do with whether or not the folks who've joined us tonight have actually been able to get into the course and see anything. So if our producers want to put that up, I'll take a minute while you're doing that, just to say, in case you just joined us, what this is we're talking about tonight and why we created it and why we created it like we did. It is essentially an 11-lesson digital, interactive, often animated, even with music, course on what we think are the fundamentals of fundraising. So not the channels, not the programs, not things you learn about in webinars like annual giving or major gifts, but really scaling us back, pulling back to what we consider the fundamentals, that foundation that you've got to put down before you try and build the house on top. We created this for several reasons. The first of which was we just heard from so many people, we don't know where to start, or we don't know what we don't know, or we saw folks working with programs and tactics without really having an understanding of what the psychology was beneath that. So we wanted to provide that foundation. We also created it because we know from our adult learning experts at Best Friends who are amazing and who are not only good at putting together animated interactive programs, but who have the basis of knowledge, such as the average person gets 1% of their work week to devote to time and to learning and development. I just have a hard time believing that, but I know it's true when I look at my schedule and other schedules. So we had to come up with something that you could digest in chunks, that you could pick your favorites from and that you could work at your own pace. So we did that. And the other reason that we created this is we wanted something that was not best friend centric. There are over 24 contributors, audio clips, sample documents. This is really our whole industry working together to put this together. So we know it's going to be exciting for you for that reason. So I want to go back to the poll and see if people had a chance to complete that. And if we've got results that we can look at it. So a quick look at that poll. Took a quick look, but haven't finished. 24% have not looked at the course at all, 76%. So we've got a wonderful opportunity tonight just to share with you the perspectives of the panelists. And hopefully if we do our job well, you'll be encouraged to dig in as we move forward. So let me begin with our first panelist. I'm going to move over to Sarah. We're going to give each panelist about 5 minutes just to talk about the applications, the insights they had, because a course is only as good as how you're going to use it. So Sarah, you want to kick us off with a little bit more about you and your team and what your insights and applications have been?
Absolutely, Trish. Thank you so much for having me and for allowing me to join this and to talk about this great program. Like you mentioned, my name is Sarah Cano. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator here at the Humane Society of Harlingen. For those of y'all who haven't heard of us yet, I hope that you do soon. If I'm doing my job right, hopefully you will soon. But we are a very small but mighty team here at the Humane Society. We've gone through some major changes as an organization in the last about year or so. We're very, very blessed in that we have Taryn Toll, one of our embed, or one of Best Friends embed employees here serving as our director of operations. And she's helped us to really transform our entire shelter, kind of from the top down, from the bottom up, just going every which way into changing things. For a background on myself, I started here at the Humane Society actually January 2nd. So talk about a crazy first year. Just about everything that you could have imagined and all the things that you couldn't imagine we went through. I'd worked in development before and, worked in the nonprofit sector before, but I'd never built an entire development program from scratch. I'm really lucky in that I have a lot of help and support. Our executive director, Luis, is amazing. He's always there to lend a helping hand, but we really did have to start from the bottom in order to get this program to where it is today and to continue on its journey to where we want it to be. And this program really helped me because, I'm sure that everyone on this call can relate. Some days you just have an absolutely insane day. And then sometimes you have 7 of those insane days in a row. And so what I really liked about it was that it wasn't planned. There wasn't anything scheduled. We could really just go at our own pace, pick it up when we have time to. And then if you need to neglect it for a little bit, that's okay too, because you could just pick up right where you left off. But what I really, really enjoyed about it was, I think a lot of the time for those of us in fundraising, we forget all the little tidbits of what we know. So this program helped me to not forget about the strong foundation, to not forget about the things that we sometimes take for granted, especially if we've been previously working in programs where we had all that set up already. This helped to make sure that we covered all of our bases in building this program, and continue to do so moving forward. One thing that I like to reference often is that when you're working with a shelter that has both a development team and an operations team, what you're really dealing with are the body and the brains of an operation, right? The body and the brains of an organization. Our operations team is our brain. They're the ones who make the day-to-day decisions to save animals' lives, to get them to the vet, to do anything that we need to do to keep the life-saving going. But in order for that brain to work, it has to be fueled. I think that's a lot of what development does, right? We make sure that our organization has what it takes to continue being able to make those life-changing decisions, to be able to send an emergency medical case to the vet as soon as it needs to go, or to be able to do anything else that it'll take to save an animal. So it's a lot about working together. It kind of works sort of like a watch. I actually don't know if watches work this way anymore, but in the old days, it used to be every little piece had to work together in order for it to work. And so I think that this program definitely helped us in being able to see all of the pieces, figure out how to make it work, and then go from there. So I'm really, really thankful for the opportunity to have been sort of a tester for this. I really enjoyed it, and I think it helped our organization a lot.
Well, we can't tell you how much we appreciate your being a tester, because you're one of the people that help make it grounded in reality. We're going to dig into some of the specific lessons and things you've created a little bit later, but let me swing over to our municipal representative, who's also here kind of wearing her executive leadership hat, because we thought it was important, since fundraising is a team sport, to get that bigger perspective. Dosson, tell us a little bit about what you got from the course and kind of the applications where you went with it.
Right. Hi, Trish. Hi, everybody. So I'm representing, I don't want you guys to listen to Sarah, who's clearly a pro at development and fundraising and engagement, and think that you have to be there to take this course. I represent all of you who really are starting from scratch, and that's what we are doing here at the Norfolk Animal Care Center. So what I liked about this virtual tool is that it goes beyond fundraising, and it really links it all back to me, which is super important to all of us, is the need for your organization to be guided by best practices, right? It all links together. And I feel like fundraising really, particularly with municipals, is that one piece that has been left out, because we all go, municipal can't fundraise, which is not true. So all of you who are munis out there, log into that virtual tool and check it out, because I guarantee you will learn a lot. And it's all in language that you can understand. You do not have to be a development professional to understand and comprehend the lessons. I also really love that it's not like a one organization show. I know Best Friends created this tool, but as Trish said, so many others contributed to it. And there's some fabulous links, and it's not links that you have to go to an appendix to find it. They're embedded right in the lessons, and they're really fun and interactive, right? It starts off basic, and I'll go into what I really loved about some things a little bit later on, but I think that particularly with munis, or everybody really doesn't really think about why people give and why they don't give. And it's like the key that we all need to be able to successfully fundraise. And if you are wondering about the answers, go check out the tool. And I do like that it's very interactive. I liked, especially if you're busy, like Sarah said, you can pick it up wherever you left off. You can pick and choose which lessons you want to learn first, which lessons you don't want to learn. I suggest going through all of it, because they all kind of like that. I wouldn't say old fashioned or old timey, Sarah, but it is like a cog in an analog watch, that they all fit together. And I just think it's a really accessible tool that is easily digestible.
Thanks so much, Dosson. And folks that don't know, we have many Michelles in the animal care field, so you will often hear me call them by their last name. No disrespect to Dosson intended, but I want to answer the question that Kate popped on for just a moment about the tool that we're talking about. Someone joined late, so I believe that that's been answered by our producers, but just for anybody else that's come in, we are talking about a new digital course on fundraising fundamentals. In your registration, there was a link to the course, and I'm sure we'll be repeating that link as well. No passwords necessary. We got this link that is open to everybody, and we want to share it far and wide. So speaking of that, let's swing over to the animal care and control world in truth and bring in Nick Walton. Nick, you want to tell us a little bit about the kinds of things that we, in a great moment of surprise, discovered were really relevant for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of frame my perspective on this, I've never once thought about fundraising when I was an animal control officer, right? It never crossed my mind. And I knew that existed within our organization, but I never thought that I could benefit from it. And I also didn't think that I could provide any benefit to it. And so for me to be on a town hall centering around fundraising, in particular this module, I wouldn't have believed you if you had told me that. But I wish I had. I wish I had gone through this module while I was an animal control officer. And I'll tell you why, because there's so many different things that I have taken away from it. And a lot of it isn't even fundraising related, it's just very applicable in my everyday life. For example, I believe it was lesson number 2, talking about removing barriers. And like when I first started, I was so overwhelmed with the thought of fundraising. And for it to be the second lesson, and it like literally broke down every single barrier to success that an organization might face. That was like a breath of fresh air for me. I was able to breathe and understand that I can do this. I can do this with zero experience, never had thought about it before. And also just the way that it was framed out, you can apply, now I'm looking at barriers for success outside of fundraising and in my day-to-day routine, and just how to systematically approach problems and head for success. There was also another lesson number 5, which was positioning your agency to appeal for donors, right? And it blew my mind. There was a stat on there, was like 69% of giving comes from individuals, not corporations, not businesses, but actual people. And like the number one reason why people don't give to an organization is because they're not asked about to give. And that like flipped a light switch in my mind, where I thought about this idea to where maybe I could create a flyer to give to animal control officers, and they can become part of the solution and part of the organization, in terms of they can help funnel resources into the shelter, right? Because I can't think of anybody better who interacts with individuals on a day-to-day basis than animal control officers. And if we had a way to efficiently and easily, have the ability they can give a flyer to an individual, and it won't take up too much time of their day, and become part of the team, and that's another point that I'd like to make, and I believe it's already been touched on, but what we're looking at today, and in particular today, is we're looking at a team. And a lot of times across the nation, you'll see silos within that organization, whether that be animal control officers and fundraising and shelter staff. But I think that like having gone through this module, it really helps paint a picture that we are working as a cohesive unit, and everybody can be a part of this. As you said, Trish, like there's a role for this for every single person within an organization. And that's not excluding animal control officers. And I thought that was really neat. Another thing that I really liked about this was after each lesson, you can fill out a small action plan, right? And so after each lesson, you're going through it, you don't even realize it, but by the end of it, not only are you pretty fluent in fundraising, which I can say that I am, but you also now have a already written action plan that you can actually go put that knowledge to use. And so just the entire module, the way it was done with the links and the user friendliness and the real life relatable audio clips and the videos with Chip the cat. By the way, if you watch this for no other reason than Chip the cat, then go ahead and do that. I love Chip the cat. But no, it's just so interactive and it makes you want to keep going. It takes a subject that a lot of people would consider as dull and turns it into something that is really fun and makes you want to keep going.
Nick, you've touched on a number of things. I want to pull on those threads. I also want to hit the question that popped up in our box. Someone was asking about estimated time. And you know this, and Sarah knows, because when you guys were testing, what we learned is everybody takes a different amount of time to go through the digital material, depending on what their past experience has been. At the beginning of each of the lessons is an estimated median time that it took our testers to go through. Most modules are somewhere between 30 minutes, the longest, or about an hour. And then it's up to you how much time you want to devote or not to the reflection worksheet and the action plan that Nick talked about. Those are there to help you apply the material. But I think the beauty of this is that if you have very limited time and you just need to hit some high points and some key messages, then whip through the digital module and you're in and out in 15 to 30 minutes. If you really want to start using this, then you can go deeper and spend more time on it. You can do 2 lessons a week. You can do 1 lesson a week. I wouldn't advise you try to cram all 11 lessons into 1 week. But if you need to spread it out, as most people seem to do, you can spread it out over 2 or 3 months. It all depends on you and your needs and the uses that you want to make of it. So I want to pull on that thread of your flyer, Nick, before we move on to some other questions for Sarah, because we put up a link. This is actually a downloadable, fillable, printable, no best friends branding on it tool. And I want you to give people, if you will, just a sense of why you created that and how you're hoping people will use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that on the surface, it isn't necessarily transformative for an organization, but it really does provide an animal control officer with the ability to, like, efficiently, and I want to stress that, efficiently and effectively engage individuals without spending too much time, right? And that was the main thing that I keep hearing from animal control officers across the nation, is that I just don't have time. Like, I have this stack of calls I got to get to. I got to keep the truck rolling. Well, this flyer, this handout, effectively engages individuals, and all you have to do is hand it to them and talk to them a little bit about the flyer. And the flyer is really neat. It can go over what your shelter is doing, what, you know, and good things that your shelter is doing, and how you are effectively working towards saving lives. And so it kind of uses everything within this fundraising module, condenses it into a little flyer, in particular relationship building, and how to effectively build relationships. And so it's really, really neat tool. I'm super excited to get it out there into the world, because I really do feel that it can benefit animal control officers across the nation. And I think that if I had this whenever I was an animal control officer, we would have had so many more resources come in through the door, because you're turning your animal control team or animal services team into a borderline action team, right? And I really do, I can't wait to see this thing hit the market and go.
And you want to hear, right? You'd love for people to, when they use it, send us their success stories.
Yes, 100%, absolutely, and there, as much as possible. So even if you have any critiques for it, let me know, because I think that this is going to be something really cool for organizations moving forward.
Super, super. Thank you. Sarah, I saw your eyes sparkling. I can't tell if it was when Nick was talking about relationships or when he was talking about creating things, which is something we all talked about as a goal for our network partners out there, to be able to create new things that would work for them from this course. So tell us a little more. Why were your eyes sparkling a few moments ago?
Well, it definitely had to do with both of those. Hearing somebody outside of the development world talk about relationship building and creating new programs is the best for someone in development. It's really what we live for. Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Nick said. There really is so much more to learn from this module than just the basics of fundraising. One of those big ones is relationship building, you know, learning how to cultivate, not just taking someone and turning them into a donor, but taking, you know, your adopters and starting that conversation, breaking down the barriers in order to turn that adopter into a donor, or that foster into a donor, or even if they can't donate, just getting them more involved, taking that extra step to ensure that you have that extra retention to keep them involved once they've already been a part of your program in one way, shape, or form. One of the big things that we're focusing on here at the Humane Society of Harlingen is what you call the culture of donor care, a culture of philanthropy and gratitude. I think that from the development side of things, this program teaches you how to position your organization to accept gifts, but it's not just in terms of making sure you have the paperwork ready. It's also in terms of making sure that our staff members at all times are prepared to accept a donor, not just a donor's gift, but accept them as a donor, learn how to really just keep them coming back, making them feel good. You know, like Nick said, not everyone is a fundraiser, but there's a role for everyone in that process. It would be crazy to think that those of us who our jobs are dedicated just to fundraising are going to be there every single time that a donation comes in the door. But if we can work to expand our network of fundraising and donor stewardship to our entire staff, the chances of us retaining that donor are so much higher. And you know, like Dosson said the other day, more money, more mission, right? So you always want to keep people coming back in anything that you can do.
I think she's trying to make t-shirts with that logo on there. More
That's
money.
your logo, Trish.
Your first purchaser.
I want to move, it's a great segue to the next thing that I want to ask Dosson, but I do want to mention that one of the things that Sarah and her colleagues have created is a monthly giving program. And we often get questions about those. So that is something that I think they felt very confident moving forward with once they kind of been through the psychology and the fundamentals that lie beneath. Am I wrong about that, Sarah?
No, you're right on par.
Great. So look for great things from the 956 champions coming your way, monthly giving. So Dosson, I want to swing back to you. Sarah talked a little bit about how she and her whole team have used some of this. And I wanted to see from an executive point of view, are there things that you see here that you want to use with your team or with volunteers, or just how are you sharing the love, so to speak?
Well, we're just starting actually. So yeah, there's definitely things that we are working on. I am very fortunate to have a nonprofit group called the Friends of the Norfolk Animal Care Center, who we work with fundraising and applying for grants. And there's several reasons for that. I mean, and I will double back that government agencies are allowed to fundraise, but sometimes it's a lot easier if you go through your 501c3, especially accepting the money and going through government process. Once you do have, if you've received a grant or anything, it's a lot quicker if you go through your 501c3. But that's something that you have to do from the beginning. And I like to do that because, you know, it promotes collaboration and Sarah, relationship building, because our, you know, they're a stakeholder of ours and our community is our stakeholder too, but they are able to engage on a different level separate of the shelter. And when they're able, I just like working with them, and it just opens up more opportunities. But, you know, going back to kind of saying a little bit of what Nick said, but the removing barriers was such a huge eye opener for the team here. There've been a lot of eye openers over the last several months since I got here. We're just kind of learning as we go along. We have a pretty new executive team and management team. So there've been a lot of surprises, but fundraising was just something that we here said, no, we can't do that. Cannot do that. We have to go through our 501c3. But I love that lesson to removing barriers. And you do say in the beginning, it is specifically designed for municipals in mind. But I love the term knowledge is power, right? Maybe you want, if you're not a municipal, maybe you want to stick around to this lesson and get a better understanding of where the municipal shelters are coming from. And I really, really love that, because part of my mission and my passion is to really close the gap between municipal agencies and everybody else. And you can't do that without perspective, right? And that goes both ways. But this was just great. I loved hearing that knowledge is power. Please, if you guys, you'll learn a lot and you'll get a better perspective of where we're coming from. I love that it gets down to nitty gritty. It basically says, hey, these barriers that you think you have, are they real? I mean, and it's such a way where it's just like, is it perceived or does it actually exist? And Nick touched a little bit on this, but you know, they list a bunch of them. You can take a little quiz, and it's not like you get a score or anything, right? But it really just explains what you perceive as a barrier, and you know, you can decide if it's real or not, but it also tells you how to get around all those barriers. So when you're presented with a solution, really, do you have an excuse anymore other than, you know, yourself being the barrier? So that was a really good, like, introspective moment. I was like, wow, am I the barrier? And, you know, that's hard for people to admit, but sometimes it really is. Anyway, and another thing that I loved hearing is that, you know, charitable donations to government agencies are tax deductible if made for public purpose, right? And I don't know any other municipal agency that's not established for public purpose. So I know that you also say do not give tax advice out, and please make friends with your legal and finance department, and click on the federal tax links that you have embedded right into that tool, and also research your state information, the state links that you need to go to, but don't work in a silo, work with your finance and your finance and legal counsel as well with your cities and counties. But yeah, I really liked it because it was a in your face, but no guilt shaming. It was just like, hey, let's look at where you're at as an agency. So.
Exactly. Now tell us who your friend is, because everyone will want to know.
This is Drexel. It's been a long day. We're at the office still, so he was being a little needy. It's a lot easier for me to just put him in my lap. I also wanted to mention in the first lesson, it's kind of like a self-assessment, and you take the little thing and you go through it, and it's a positive spin, glasses half full kind of look on where your organization is at the moment, right? I said before, there's no like low score that's going to be published. It just provides you with really digestible action items that are written in, plain language that we can all understand and take action on. So I love that. And it emphasizes that there's no cookie cutter portfolio for everybody, right? There's no one size fits all. Everywhere is different. And like you do what is suitable for you and what you can do. So yeah, we're just starting our journey and we've got a lot to learn. And Sarah, I'll probably be tapping you for a lot of things.
I think we'll all be tapping each other. And I just want to affirm what Dosson said. Everything we put in here has been from a place of, as Teddy Roosevelt said, start with what you have, where you are, right? It's not coming from a place of judgment. We didn't do scores. I mean, I know scores can be done non-judgmentally, but we just wanted to say, here's where you are. Okay, well, maybe you want to take this next step, or how about looking at this resource? And I think we just put up the course link again so that people can check that out if they want to as we're talking. And while I'm going to go on record and say, no, Dosson, you are not the obstacle, believe me. And I know you know that, but I have worked in all the years I've been in fundraising, I have worked with executive leaders who had certain things in their background that proved to be obstacles. Like maybe they were raised in a family where it was not cool to talk about money. Or maybe they were a hard charging independent, I got here all on my own kind of lone ranger who thought that asking for any kind of help, heaven forbid money, was something that just wasn't done. So what we try to do in that lesson 2 that does crop up a lot, because we really tailored it to municipal agencies, is just trying to think through what are those barriers, and are they internal or are they external? Are they misapprehensions about what the law is? And here are the links. Have your legal counsel, as Dosson said, go and read these for himself or herself, and then make that decision, because every agency or 501c3 needs to be comfortable and that they are doing what both state and federal law allow and require of them. And if you don't have a 501c3 that you at all, or if you're happy with, do take a look at lesson 4. We do have in lesson 4, building a board, working with a 501c3, also just how to think about that. If you're just trying to decide whether you need a 501c3 as a municipal agency or not, we've got some good tips and we've also got some playbooks. I want to answer a couple of questions that we've had. Sarah is in Texas, for the person who wanted to know what state that she was in. And then I also want to swing back. We've been talking a lot about fundraising and putting the fun in that. I want to check in with Nick, because as he said, and we were very honest with each other when he got involved in this, all the words used for fundraising by a lot of people in programs are dry, sterile, boring, scary, intimidating. I'm sure you can think of some more, but Nick took that project on and was willing to tell us what lessons he wrestled with and what topics, because when a topic's not interesting to you personally, it's even harder. So Nick, tell us a little bit about sort of what you wrestled with so people will know.
Yeah, for sure. Now, there were very few that I like really wrestled with, just to be clear. And like the whole thing is very systematically done, and like the user friendliness of it. And it's almost like you're working with a mentor, right? It's like, it really truly feels like there's somebody helping you along the way, instead of like you're doing it on your own. And so first off, I just want to let that be known. But it is challenging. And there are parts of this module that I did have trouble with, in particular, lesson number 6, which was about essentially budget makeovers, right? And boy, like coming from animal services, looking at a spreadsheet of a budget, I was having a hard time, I'm not gonna lie about it. But keep in mind, every single time that I would feel stressed out or I would feel like I was unable to do it, there's a helpful link or a helpful audio clip or a helpful video or an interactive piece that really switches it up and lets you know that you don't need to be at this step right now, but you can do this, right? And it's very comforting, and it makes you feel like you can do this, and it makes you something about just the way that this thing was structured. I made it through. I made it through the entire budget makeover lesson. And for me to do that, it means you did an excellent job. You and the team did. But yeah, no, I would say number 6, the budget makeovers, is the biggest lesson that I had trouble with. But just once again, the resources, the links, the audio, it made it manageable. And I learned a lot from it.
I think the budget lesson is probably one that lots of people will feel like they need to dig in on. And we put it in there because we know so many people start out with foundation request. You know, there are basically 3 sources of revenue, and it's foundations, individuals, and corporations or businesses, that whole component. But just as Nick was saying, the largest amount of charitable dollars in this country come from individuals. And when you keep going back to foundations year in, year out, same small number of foundations, it gets more and more challenging. So we've got to do a better job with that. And one of the ways to do that is to really be able to dig into whatever overall organizational or agency budget you have and know what are some of the principles that you can use to pull out and repackage the appropriate and relevant parts of that budget for your foundation grant. And I want to give a shout out to Gina Barker on our foundations team, who is just the budget goddess. This woman came up with all kinds of ways to really deconstruct a pretty sterile, dry subject. And then my co-creator of this course, Tina Overgaard, who is our e-learning specialist, adult learning and e-learning, came up with ways like working with an interactive funnel, working with interactive wheels, things that by doing, you sort of imprint the information in your muscle memory. And I think it's something that it's a challenging lesson, but it's one that everybody who is asking for big gifts these days, whether it be from a corporation, foundation, or a major individual donor, you cannot go wrong spending some time with that and getting those skills under your belt. I see we've got a question wanting Sarah. I think the question is asking Sarah if she would mind talking about her monthly program or mentoring. And so I can't speak for Sarah, but I know that monthly giving is something we probably want to put our heads together, all of us network partner, maybe Sarah and a couple of the other groups that I'm working with now on monthly, and maybe we can do something on that. So we'll pick up that thread, if you don't mind, Megan, after the show, so to speak, and figure out how we can help with that. Can I swing back to Dosson for just a moment and talk a little bit about just how this course fits in with some of the other things you've experienced as a leader? You were part of Best Friends Executive Leadership Certification. And I just wondered if you saw some compatibility between those, some synthesis. What would you say for those that are interested in participating by that program? I should add, it is an invitation only program, but we do have somewhere you can inquire if you are interested in that type of thing. But how did those two work together for you?
Well, I think you can get nominated for the ELC through your regional representative. So get to know your regional team through Best Friends, and it's on the website, I think. But definitely, so just for a little background, the ELC is one of the first of its kind in the nation, where it is specifically designed for the leaders, executive leadership of life-saving. And there are other courses and academies out there that touch on executive leadership, but this is really, it's just a group of leaders getting together, learning together, and then supporting each other. For me, this tool, it relates in the fact that for me, I have the least experience in fundraising, right? And I am a new director. I started 2 weeks before everything shut down. So in a new community, and just kind of learning what it is and to be an executive leader. And I feel like this position in itself is can be and is super isolating, particularly when, you frequently move across the country when you take new positions like this. And the ELC gave me that community, that supportive community that I needed. But how it relates to fundraising is that it's just taught me a whole bunch. I spent 6 months learning from peers, and we touch on a lot of things, but fundraising is just a small part of that. And this virtual tool is an extension of what I already learned there. But not only is it an extension, but I'm actually in this position now. When I was taking the ELC, I wasn't in an executive leadership role. I was just looking for one, and I knew that that's where I wanted to go. So this tool is just supporting me. I don't have a development team behind me. I mean, of course I have city departments, but I don't have that team behind me that's in our organization. So this is just kind of steering me, so to speak, like, where do I start? What do I do? And also, like, what do I don't do? And we learned that quite a bit. We've done some fundraisers here and there, but really before this tool, it was kind of like without direction, right? Do fundraising, show your dollar impact, but don't be restrictive. Don't do specific fundraising for specific things. Leave it open, show examples. So yeah.
That's a great point. That's a great point. We often see, as we're working with organizations and agencies, a couple of the things you mentioned. We see people tackle fundraising tactics without really understanding how they work. So for instance, events are widely used, and we've all had to change the way we think about events because of COVID. But I'm actually hoping that as people have looked for alternatives to live events, when we start to come out of COVID, that they will still be thinking about alternatives, partly because of what Nick said about individuals really being the way to go, and building up those annual giving, those individual giving programs, whether it's monthly, whether it's campaigns at the end of the year, but really working on that as opposed to just saying, let's have an event, as opposed to thinking more strategically about that event and the individuals, corporations, and foundations that support it. So I hope people, that's something that I think you can take all the way to the executive level or down to the bare bones implementation level and use. I feel like that one of the things you and Nick have told me is that this has busted a lot of myths about fundraising for you. And I'm kind of curious to know, since Sarah has had exposure in fundraising before, were there any myths that you still sort of had in the back of your mind that the course was able to break open?
Absolutely. I'm actually doing another mentorship with Matt from Best Friends. And earlier we were talking about, and I'm sorry to spill the beans on your question from the intro, Dosson, about the number one reason that people don't donate. But the answer to that is because they weren't asked, just like Nick said. It's not taboo to ask. For some reason that has stuck with me, throughout my career. But it just kind of breaking down that it's not taboo to ask. People only know to donate if you do ask them to donate. Provide them with options to donate. Think about, cultivate that relationship, figure out the best situation, the most likely situation for them to donate, and then ask that, right? It may come off a little weird if you're asking someone to donate $1 million when you know they can't do that, but if you take the time to cultivate that relationship, get to know this donor or potential donor, and then approach them with a realistic ask, then it's not taboo. It's totally within, I guess, within respectable boundaries, you could say, to be able to do that. And it's the only way that this works.
I want to add to what Sarah said, that we have the opportunity, because every day we save lives and change lives. And I will tell you that the gurus of fundraising that I learned under always said, if you can't rephrase your mission in terms of saving lives and changing lives, you need to go and shut yourself in your office until you can figure that out. Because in the end, at the end of the day, that's the only two things that matter. And how lucky are we that we don't have to work at that? That is what we do, save lives and change lives. So to that segment of the population that cares about this, not just about animals, but about the people who care about animals, because we do see so much overlap. As you know, we've had many discussions about it recently, and people who have worked in this area for years know how this relates to population and challenges for humans as well. We're offering individuals with the capacity an opportunity that will not come again in our lifetime. And so the work begins with us. If that's the way we see it, we can go forward, be bold, be respectful, and be successful. If we're still sort of in the back of our mind coming from a scarcity mentality and, oh, I hate to ask, and I know COVID has changed that a bit, but we're working, and I know others are working to say in a respectful way, if you find yourself in a position to give, here's the impact you can make in saving lives and changing lives. Always coming back, not to how we run things, how we do our programs, but what is that impact? And I see Sarah nodding her head. Jump in if you
Yes,
want to.
because you're right on to it. You know, when you're asking for a donation, one thing that Luis and I always go back to is there's a role for everyone here, everyone who has any sort of inkling of interest, compassion, desire to get involved with this kind of work. It's the same mission. You're just repackaging it for that donor, right? So if it's cats that somebody really cares about, go in there and tell them all the great things that you're doing with cats. If it's, you know, helping with a certain population in our community, go in there and talk about your low cost vaccination clinics, about your pet food pantries. All of this is a part of a greater mission. There's a way to target it, and honestly, right? You're not having to do anything wrong. It's just a matter of repackaging it to create the right ask.
Good point. Good point. We are coming up on our question time, and I want to get to two questions we've had, and I'll go ahead and give a brief answer to each of those. And then if any of our panelists want to jump in on either of these, let me know. One person asked, does the course talk about software to track donors and gifts? So what we do have in lesson 3, organizing internally, is we have some thoughts on how to choose, not necessarily what to choose, because that's different for every organization. But we do have several people giving audio clips. There are people from different size organizations. They talk about Little Green Light. They talk about Blackbaud, Razor's Edge. We do have one person from Best Friends who helps people make some choices, talking about how to do that. And we have a wonderful link to a very, very good webinar done by someone in our organization from several years ago that gives an actual chart of advantages, disadvantages for different types of software. But I think what you'll really find valuable is the how to choose. And then you're always welcome to contact us, and we're happy to put you in touch with people who have actually and are actually using that software. For instance, I've just helped some people in California network with some people in Virginia, because the Virginia people are about 2 steps ahead of the Californians just in their selection choice. So they've helped them figure out how to choose and then how to narrow things down, and we can help with that. And then a question that kind of goes back to a little bit of what we talked about before, but I think we can answer this more specifically. Does the course cover how to address municipal organizations that say they can't ask for donations? And yes, we do talk about that. What we ask you to do is to find out what the objection is, where the objection's coming from, and who it's coming from. Because as Dosson knows, and she's nodding her head, a lot of things are just historical, right? It's how it always was. It got passed down from person to person. And when we go back and look deeply into the situation, maybe the person that was against fundraising has left, Or if the issue is really valid, that maybe there's a concern about liability with the public, then finding that out and looking for ways to address that. So you'll hear us talk a little bit about that. You'll also hear Melissa Nicely from Charlotte. She was one of our contributors, talk about how they began to do, let's say, activities in the comfort zone for their municipality. And every time something happens and the sky doesn't fall, people get a little more confident. So start with that lesson 2 and look at that part that talks about overcoming barriers. And then I'm always happy if you've got questions coming out of your examination of a lesson, send them to team2025@bestfriends.org. And I pick up on those on a regular basis, and I'm happy to apply it to your specific situation. Anything that any of our 3 panelists want to say, either about that municipal issue or about donor tracking?
Yeah, I want to add, come to your municipality, your municipal shelter with solutions. If they're being a barrier to life saving and they're saying we can't do it, do some research, do it all for them and present it to who you need to present it to. Work with them. If they are adamant about not doing it, look into becoming a nonprofit, or is there an existing nonprofit that can partner with the muni. But come with solutions. I know that not everybody is as open, but I think there's a history of us versus them, and which of course should no longer exist, but it does. It's reality, right? We live now, and these are realities. So all I'm saying is just come with solutions and come with a list of things. Hey, why don't we try this and that? Because if you're not part of a municipality, their processes take a lot of time, and they're often very understaffed and underfunded. So they may think that they need a specific dedicated person to that for fundraising, but let them know that they don't. Show them this tool. Yeah.
Super. Any other thoughts on that? Any other voices that would like to join that conversation? All right, then Sarah, anything you want to say just on donor tracking? You just recently got started with yours. Any thoughts on that?
We used a little green light. Don Jennings was the one that opened the door to little green light for us. I think it's great. It's pretty user friendly. It didn't take me too long to figure it out. The biggest part of your donor tracking system will be taking everything that you have on paper or in separate spreadsheets and then putting it into that software. So take a road trip or close all the windows and just sit there and go at it.
Sounds great. So we're coming up almost on the hour. I want to invite the folks who are on the call to think about what they think we should create next, and maybe let us know that in the days to come. I also want to encourage people, I don't see any more open questions. If you have a question right now, please feel free to put it in, but you can also send us those questions at a later time. And then just, if you use the course in the coming months and you have a success with it, or even if you have something that's not successful, we'd love to hear those stories. We think that's the most important way to help other people be bold and try new things, is if they know someone else has had a success. So let us know those stories, again, through team2025@bestfriends.org. I want to wrap up by thanking all of our panelists and our producers and all of you who joined us tonight. Thanks for giving up your time, for being with us.